A crowded courtroom buzzed with tension as the judge's gavel slammed against the bench. In the back, a group of officers exchanged smug glances, clearly entertained. To them, it was a performance, but none of them realized just how drastically the balance of power was about to shift. Things can change in an instant. The ones who celebrate the loudest are often the least ready for what's coming. Let us know. Have you ever witnessed someone finally face the consequences they thought they dodged? The officer's grip on Alicia Monroe's wrist was punishing. She didn't react, didn't resist. But that didn't stop him from twisting the cuffs tighter, acting as though she were a genuine threat. "Don't say a word," he growled, driving his knee into her back as he forced her into the cruiser. Alicia kept her breathing steady, her eyes focused. She already knew what this would become. Headlines, outrage, a narrative someone else would try to spin. Cameras were everywhere, students frozen in disbelief. A black woman, a respected visiting professor, arrested mid-lecture? Of course they recorded every second. Phones were up. Whispers swirled like smoke. But Alicia wasn't naive. She'd seen this before. If they controlled the story, they could suppress the facts. The officer driving was built like a linebacker, bald and glancing at her through the rearview mirror every few seconds. His partner snorted a laugh. "Crazy how simple it is," the bald one said. "Didn't even have to push much," the other added. "Some folks practically volunteer." Alicia turned her head ever so slightly. "What was simple exactly?" The bald one grinned. "Come on. You were holding." "Was I?" she asked. He reached into his vest and held up a small clear bag with a white substance inside. "Caught in the act," he smirked. She examined the bag, then looked him dead in the eye, calm, precise, like a professor about to grade a failing paper. "Interesting," she said. "That wasn't in my possession before." His grin widened. "You sure?" She didn't answer. She didn't have to. The city outside sped by in a blur of lights and shadows, the station only minutes away. But Alicia knew she wouldn't be there long. Men like this never checked the fine print. When the cruiser pulled up to the station, she was yanked from the back seat, her boots scraping against the pavement. Her face gave nothing away. She'd endured worse. Inside, they processed her like they would anyone else. Photos, fingerprints, the same tired script. "Name?" the officer behind the desk asked. She tilted her head. "Didn't even check my ID?" He laughed dismissively. "You'll be in the system in a minute." He started typing. Then everything stopped. His smile dropped, shoulders stiff, eyes lifted toward her, suddenly unsure. Hang on," he said, voice uneven, pushing his chair back. The room grew quiet. The bald officer frowned, stepping closer to the screen. "What's the issue?" he asked. The desk officer licked his lips. "We need the captain." "For what?" Baldy asked, irritation creeping in. Before he could respond, a door opened at the far end of the room. A tall man in full uniform stepped out, his eyes locking on Alicia the moment he entered. She met his gaze without flinching. He exhaled like someone who'd just seen a ghost. "Damn it!" The laughter, the arrogance, gone. Everyone stood still, watching, unsure. Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Something wrong, Captain?" Silence. The bald officer shifted beside her. "Can someone please tell me what's happening?" The captain ignored him, walked over to the screen, then back to Alicia. His voice dropped. "I need to make a call." Alicia let a small smile tug at her lips. "You do that." For the first time since they slapped cuffs on her, the tone in the room changed. The bravado cracked. The smirks faded. And Alicia Monroe? She was just getting started. Inside the holding cell, everything was dull and gray, the walls, the bench, the air. She sat calmly, like someone waiting for a delayed train, not a woman locked up with strangers. The other women glanced at her, curious, but kept to themselves. Alicia was unfazed. This wasn't defeat. This was another step in a much larger strategy. The metal door creaked open. "Monroe!" a voice barked. "You've got a visitor." She didn't rush. She didn't give them satisfaction. Not yet. She didn't jump to her feet when they called her. There was no need for that kind of performance. Instead, she inhaled slowly, rolled her shoulders to shake off the tension, and only then stood up. The officer waiting for her wasn't one of the ones who'd arrested her. He was younger, still had that look of someone who thought he could do some good in the world. Alicia had come across his type before. Most either grew cold or walked away eventually. He led her through a narrow hallway, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead like a dull warning. The station wasn't huge, just another piece in the worn-out machinery of a system that had been corrupt far longer than anyone cared to admit. They stopped outside a small room, the usual setup: metal table, 2 chairs, no windows. Her wrists were still in cuffs, but she didn't complain as he guided her inside. Sitting at the table was a man who looked like he hadn't had a full night's sleep in weeks. His suit was rumpled, his tie loosened just enough to feign ease, though his eyes betrayed the fatigue of 100 similar cases. "Miss Monroe," he said with a nod. "I'm David Keller. I'll be representing you." Alicia took the seat opposite him without a word. Keller glanced at the officer still lingering in the doorway, waiting for him to leave. But the officer crossed his arms and stayed put. "She's cuffed," he said flatly. "I'd still like to speak with my client in private," Keller replied, trying to keep his voice neutral. There was a pause, then a sigh. The officer finally left, closing the door behind him. Keller rubbed his palms together, thinking through his approach. "Okay," he began. "Let's start with the charges. They planted it." Her voice was level, unshaken. "Sorry?" he asked, clearly thrown. "The drugs," she clarified. "They weren't mine." Keller's expression tightened. "Miss Monroe, I understand this is a difficult situation." "I'm not panicking," she interrupted calmly. "I'm giving you the facts." He pressed his fingers to his temple, already tired. "My job isn't to pass judgment. It's to get you the best deal we can. Based on the evidence, it may be smart to consider a plea." Her head tilted slightly. "And what would I be admitting to exactly?" He hesitated. "Possession with intent to distribute." She gave a short, sharp laugh. It was hollow, more disbelief than humor. "Do I look like someone running product?" He didn't answer. "No," she said, leaning back. "Didn't think so." Keller's patience was thinning. "I am trying to help you." "No," she countered. "You're trying to clear this off your desk as quickly as possible." That hit something. His jaw tightened. "If this goes to trial, the consequences could be severe." "And if it does," she said without flinching, "I walk out free." He studied her for a moment. "You sound confident." "I am." A heavy silence settled over the table. Keller leaned back, eyes narrowing. "You're not just a guest lecturer, are you?" She didn't react. "You tell me." He let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "All right, no deal. But that means we fight." A slow smile crept across her face. "Good. Let's talk strategy." Hours passed. The precinct's atmosphere shifted. There was tension in the air now, palpable. Officers exchanged quiet words and wary glances. Alicia noticed how their backs straightened a little too stiffly when she was around. Something had changed. They were nervous. The buzz of the lock echoed again. "Monroe." This time she stood easily. No need for force. The officer didn't touch her. He didn't have to. She walked beside him, head high, steps calm. They took a different path this time. Past cluttered desks, old case files, half-finished reports, and cold cups of coffee. At the end of the hallway stood a familiar face, the officer who had slipped the drugs into her things. His bravado had vanished. He didn't smile now. She did. The captain's office was more spacious than the interrogation room, but the piles of files and weight of silence made it feel smaller. A large desk dominated the space. Behind it sat Captain Robert Vance, salt and pepper hair, furrowed brow, the look of someone who had seen too much and fixed too little. She remained standing. So did he. "Alicia Monroe," he said slowly. She looked him in the eye. "Captain," he sighed. "You're a real thorn in my side. You know that?" "Only when people make poor decisions," she said with a light shrug. He stared at her for a moment longer, then pulled open a drawer and dropped a thick file onto the desk. Her file. Alicia raised an eyebrow but didn't speak. She didn't have to. Vance let out a sharp breath. "Who the hell are you?" Monroe gave a casual shrug. "That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?" His jaw tightened. "We ran your ID, checked your history. There's nothing. You don't exist." Pause followed. Then Alicia let out a low chuckle and shook her head. "Oh, Captain," she murmured. "You really should have done your research." The air thickened with tension. She leaned in, her hands still cuffed, and lowered her voice just enough. "Because by the time you figure it out," she said softly, "it'll already be far too late." Vance didn't move, didn't speak. Deep down, he already understood. This wasn't some ordinary academic, not someone they could silence with trumped-up charges. They had made a critical mistake. The station no longer felt like a place of order. The usual hum of phones and typing was buried under a growing sense of dread. Alicia Monroe stood in the captain's office, wrists still restrained. Yet the shift in control had already begun. Captain Robert Vance sat behind his desk, his eyes bouncing between the woman in front of him and the open file that now weighed heavy on his conscience. "You're not just a professor," he muttered. Alicia offered a faint smile, calm, deliberate. "I never claimed to be." Vance exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against the desk. The moment her name had been routed through the right intelligence channels, everything unraveled. Her identity had been locked behind layers of access far above his clearance. But the rest of the department didn't know yet. To them, this was still just another clean bust, another name on a docket. The officers who'd framed her, who slapped cuffs on her like it meant nothing, they still believed they'd won. Vance snapped the file shut and leaned in. "You're FBI." She said nothing. She didn't have to. His voice dropped. "How far up?" Alicia tilted her head. "Why don't you tell me?" Vance hesitated only for a moment. Then, "Director." The word landed like a hammer. Suddenly, the walls around them felt tighter, the air more difficult to breathe. The woman across from him wasn't just a field agent. She was the one who signed off on operations, who held power over entire task forces. And they had thrown her into a cell like a common criminal. He leaned back, running a tired hand over his face. "Jesus." Outside the glass wall of his office, laughter drifted in from the break room. The same officers who had orchestrated her arrest were celebrating. They were blind to the storm they'd just unleashed. "This is bad," he said quietly. "For who?" Alicia asked, her expression unreadable. His silence was telling. She eased back in her chair, letting him sit with the realization. Vance wasn't new to this. He'd seen his share of political fires and internal cover-ups. But this was something else entirely. "Let me ask you something," Alicia said, her voice light, almost casual. "Were you aware?" His gaze snapped to hers. "Aware of what?" "That your men were dirty." His face hardened. "I run a clean house." She gave a quiet, disbelieving hum and glanced through the window at the officers outside. Laughing, slapping backs, completely unaware of the fallout about to come down. "No," she said calmly. "You don't." He bristled. "You don't know anything about this department." "I know 2 of your men planted narcotics on a federal officer," she said smoothly. "I know the prosecutor has already prepared charges." He didn't deny it. "And I know," she continued, lowering her voice, "that if I'm not out of this building in 5 minutes, I'm making a call that will take down everyone from here to D.C. Vance's hands curled into tight fists on the desk. The full weight of what had happened now sat squarely on his shoulders. If this leaked, if she followed through, his entire command would burn. He'd just gotten the news, and it hit like a hammer. His career wasn't just ending. It was being erased. His precinct, his rank, his badge. Everything was about to go up in flames. Alicia watched the realization creep over his face like a slow tidal wave. At last, with a defeated sigh, he reached for his belt, pulled out a key, and unlocked her cuffs. As the metal released with a soft click, Alicia calmly rubbed her wrists. Not out of relief, because she'd never been afraid, but with quiet triumph. She rose smoothly while Vance stayed seated, staring at her like a man watching the ground disappear beneath him. "You might want to call your officers in," she said with silky precision. "Before I do." Vance didn't argue. His hand was already moving to the intercom. "All officers, Dunlap and Torres, report to my office." Immediately, the announcement echoed through the station. Laughter from the break room died instantly. Alicia didn't linger. She walked out of the office, past Vance's desk, and into the open precinct. Eyes turned toward her. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Dunlap, the bald one, and Torres, with his usual smug grin, approached confidently, still thinking they held control. Then they saw her, uncuffed, standing tall, and their faces shifted. Torres slowed. Dunlap's smirk faded. Alicia's face stayed neutral as they passed. But just as they entered the captain's office, she pivoted slightly. "Make the most of it," she said under her breath. Dunlap hesitated. "Make the most of what?" She locked eyes with him, voice low but steady. "The last 5 minutes before your job ends." His mouth opened to respond, but Vance cut in sharply. "Shut the door." It slammed shut behind them. Alicia turned back to the rest of the precinct. She scanned the room. Officers looked away. Some whispered. Others just stared, unsure and unsettled. The mood had shifted like a cold wind. Then from the far end of the room, a voice rang out. "Director Monroe." Everything stopped. She looked over her shoulder. A man stood at the entrance, dressed sharply in a dark suit. His posture was crisp, federal. He held up a badge. "Ma'am, we're here to take you home." Alicia's lips curled into a faint smile. She gave a small nod and walked toward him. Behind her, the walls that had once shielded corruption were beginning to crack. The SUV ride to the federal building was quiet, heavy with the weight of everything that had just unfolded. City lights smeared across the windows, neon colors bleeding into the shadows. Alicia stretched her fingers, still feeling the ghost of the cuffs on her wrists. "You okay, Director?" the agent in the front asked, glancing at her through the mirror. She didn't respond immediately. Her fingers tapped a silent rhythm on her knee, her mind already calculating next steps. "I will be," she said at last. The vehicle slid into an underground garage. Security waited. As she stepped out, agents straightened into attention. Some looked visibly relieved. Others still burned with anger. No one asked for an explanation. They didn't need one. A tall man in a sharp navy suit stepped forward, his face tight but composed. "Director Monroe, the Attorney General is ready for you." She nodded once and walked past him, entering the private elevator. As the doors slid closed behind her, she ascended in silence, toward the floor where the real reckoning would begin. The conference room, walled in glass and overlooking the city skyline, held a tense stillness. At the polished mahogany table sat the Attorney General, an older man with silver-threaded hair and fatigue etched into his face, and next to him, a composed woman in a sharp black suit, head of Internal Affairs. Their expressions were far from welcoming. Alicia entered with deliberate calm, her posture unshaken, and slid into the seat opposite them. A long silence lingered until the Attorney General finally spoke, pressing his palms to the table. "You've stirred up quite the storm." Alicia met his eyes without a flicker of doubt. "No," she replied evenly. "I revealed one." Internal Affairs leaned forward, fingers laced on the table. "The officers who detained you are already being held," she informed her. "Their captain tried to protect them, but once your record came across his desk, he gave in. They've confessed, planted evidence, accepted bribes, coerced testimony. The entire station is now under scrutiny." Alicia gave a slight nod of approval. "And the prosecutor?" The Attorney General glanced toward his colleague before she answered. "Suspended pending investigation. He pushed your case unusually fast. Turns out he's got a reputation. Too many celebrated convictions under suspicious circumstances." It had fallen together faster than Alicia imagined. Tackling corruption at the bottom was expected. Unraveling an entire operation, A system intentionally designed to chew people up and spit them out was another matter. "This won't be the last time we see something like this," she said softly. "No," the Attorney General admitted. His gaze lingered on her, searching. "You know what you've set into motion, don't you?" Alicia tilted her head slightly. "Be more specific." "This was a local case," he said. "Now it's national. The press will swarm. People will demand accountability. This won't die quietly." Her mouth curved into a slow, sharp grin. "Good," he sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "You understand the kind of enemies you're making." Her expression remained firm. "If they're against me, they were never on the right side to begin with." Another pause. Internal Affairs leaned back, giving a single nod. "What's your next step, Director?" Alicia took in a deep breath, letting the air settle in her lungs. "My next step," she echoed. Then, rising to her feet, she adjusted the cuffs of her blazer. "Prepare the press." Both officials looked uneasy. "You're going public?" Internal Affairs asked. Alicia's smile was subtle but sure. "I was arrested in the middle of the day. Cameras were rolling before I was even in the car. The public already knows something. They deserve the truth." The Attorney General didn't argue. The situation had already outpaced any attempt to contain it. The only viable path now was straight through. Alicia turned to face the city beyond the glass. It didn't seem shattered anymore, just overdue for accountability. Hours later, she stood before a press conference podium, a forest of microphones in front of her. The room buzzed with anticipation. Reporters packed wall to wall, cameras flashing. She leaned into the mic, voice unwavering. "Good evening. Many of you are aware that I was wrongfully detained yesterday." Gasps and whispers rippled through the room, but she kept going. "The individuals responsible have been apprehended. A broader investigation into deep-rooted misconduct in that precinct is underway. But let's be honest, this goes beyond one incident." The murmurs grew louder. "This is about a pattern, one that has endured in the shadows for far too long. Every day, innocent people, particularly those from Black and brown communities, are caught in a system designed not to serve them, but to exploit them. Not because they're guilty, but because corruption survives where there is no accountability." She paused. "I'm holding it accountable." The room fell into still silence. "I may lead the FBI," she continued, "but this doesn't stop with me. Justice shouldn't be a privilege. It must be a right. And the era of selective justice ends now." As reporters erupted into a frenzy of questions, Alicia stepped back, leaving the podium. Security agents closed in around her as she exited. Her work wasn't done. It was just beginning.